Over the next 10 minutes, we're going to focus on the big story of the day. Is the tide turning for Ukraine?
Ukraine is demonstrating that the Russian war machine is not unstoppable.
Russia should make a deal. Russia's lost tremendous amounts of people, and so has Ukraine.
I think that President Trump can do it, or maybe only him. I don't know, really.
Ukraine will win. It's just a question of time.
The tide is turning for Ukraine. That's what some world leaders are saying when it comes to the war. But why now? What's the current state of play on the front lines? Although Russia continues to bombard Ukraine with drone and missile attacks, killing civilians and damaging infrastructure, including this iconic cathedral, Ukraine has been hitting back. This oil refinery in Moscow had to halt its operations after a drone attack that was claimed by Ukraine. And all this as world leaders gathered in France with all eyes on President Trump and President Zelensky. Ukraine isn't part of the G7, but President Zelensky was warmly welcomed by the host, President Macron, when he arrived. And a hot mic moment revealed a key question.
So first, do you have bilaterals being organized with President Trump?
Well, European leaders want to try to convince Donald Trump to increase support for Ukraine and get tough with Russia. Germany's Friedrich Merz even gave the US president a belated birthday present with the not-so-subtle message, "We're on the same side." Comments from the president varied throughout the day. At first, he wasn't too positive.
It has no impact on us, other than we sell weapons. We're thousands of miles away. But the only reason I don't like to see 25,000 young people die every month.
Well, the US president then struck a more upbeat note about meeting President Zelensky.
We had a very good meeting. Look, Russia should make a deal. Russia's lost tremendous amounts of people, and so has Ukraine.
After leaders took this as a change in position, the US president told the G7, "I'm still boss." So is this a change of tone from Donald Trump? And if so, again, why now? Our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman in Washington explains.
Well, the war in Iran was setting things back for Ukraine, particularly the longer it went on. A number of reasons for that. One is Ukraine's desperate need for interceptors for Patriot missile systems to help them shoot down Russian attacks and defend their country. The war in Iran was putting a drain on those American armaments. But the other is this key point about President Trump having lifted some sanctions on Russian oil sales. Now, that was helping pour tens of millions of dollars into Moscow's war economy. So I think it will be something of a success, as they'll see it, for the G7, the other G7 countries, that they've got President Trump talking about Russia, Ukraine again, appearing to engage with that, and particularly his readiness, he has said, to start reimposing those sanctions on Moscow once the oil, he says, starts flowing again through the Strait of Hormuz. But I have to say, I think those countries, and Ukraine in particular, are relying on President Trump's optimism about getting a breakthrough with the Iranians. You know, he has said always that he regarded the Iran war as a short excursion. It's still far from clear that that's the case. It might turn into a much longer journey. Still not clear at all, as Mr. Trump puts it, that Iran is in the rearview mirror.
Tom Bateman in Washington. Well, Mr. Trump says Vladimir Putin needs to make a deal. So how likely is that? Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg has this assessment.
Well, if you listen to what Russian officials have been saying, what the Russian state media has been saying, you get no sense from their statements that the tide in this war has turned in Ukraine's favour. Yes, they admit that long-range Ukrainian drone strikes deep inside Russian territory have been causing pain and damage and problems for the Russians, particularly strikes on oil infrastructure. There are reports of petrol shortages in some parts of the country. However, Vladimir Putin seems to take the long view. And he seems to believe that in this war of attrition, Russia will grind out a victory. Now, Moscow had been hoping that Donald Trump would help secure a peace deal for Moscow on Russia's terms. And I think the Kremlin will be keen to know what President Trump's current position is after the G7. Will he, on the contrary, be trying to put more pressure on Moscow? As for public opinion, there is a definite sense of fatigue here with the war. People are talking more about when will this war end. People are talking a lot about the drone attacks too. I was in the supermarket the other day, my local supermarket, and the cashier was talking to me about the drones which have been attacking the Moscow region. And that is a sign, I think, that people are realising that this war has come much closer to home.
Steve Rosenberg. So, what about the situation on the ground? These are the current fighting lines. The G7 leaders say the balance of strength has changed in favour of Ukraine, with what they describe as a new momentum on the battlefield. Well, Nick Beake is our correspondent in Kiev. Nick, one of the questions that's amongst the most searched online by people is a reminder of when the war actually started.
Hi Martine, yeah, the full-scale invasion started on the 24th of February 2022. I remember that because I was standing in this place when the sirens started blaring and the Russians were invading. 8 years before that, in 2014, Russia had launched this illegal annexation of Crimea, so those are the dates.
Another search that is very popular online is just how many people have died on each side in this conflict.
Yeah, really hard to say for sure. President Zelensky said in February that 55,000 Ukrainian troops had been killed. Now, some analysts believe it's much more than that. They say maybe 140,000. As for the Russian troops killed, the BBC has identified 220,000 names of people who've been killed fighting for Russia. But just last month, the biggest spy agency in the UK said it could be 500,000.
Another one, Nick, that people are curious about is Ukraine going to join the European Union?
Well, it's applied to join, Martine, and the negotiations have just started. It's a long process, though. Ukraine has to show that it's got democratic institutions here that are fit for purpose. It needs to show that it's rooted out corruption, but it could take years. And at the end of it, all of the other EU countries have to agree to having Ukraine in the club.
Nick, stay with us. Ukraine is claiming back territory at an extraordinary rate, and much of its success is thanks to cheap and effective drones. Mikey Kay from the Security Brief explains how drone technology is helping Ukraine.
I spoke to a Ukrainian Special Forces drone commander today, and he told me specifically that they're targeting mid-strike capability now. The Russian logistical resupply machine that is feeding the Russian infantry that are fighting in the occupied areas of Ukraine in the east. They're using three key capabilities. The Beluga, which is a one-way attack drone, that's specifically going after Russian armor, trucks, and personnel. They're using something called the Hornet, which is a first-person view drone interceptor targeting the Geran 2 one-way attack drones. The Russians are putting about 6,500 of those on Ukraine every month. And then the third one is the Dementor, and that is a drone specifically designed to take out Russian intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance drones. And using that ecosystem, the Ukrainians have now regained more territory than they've had since the beginning of the Russian aggression in February 2022.
Mikey Kay. So, Nick, to you in Kiev, is this the tide turning for Ukraine? What's your assessment?
Well, it doesn't feel like it when the Russians launched their big attacks like they did a couple of days ago. More than 600 drones were sent across Ukraine, 70 missiles, 20 of which got through, and the Ukrainians say they desperately need more of these American-made Patriot interceptors to try and protect their towns and cities. But as Mikey was saying there, when it comes to drone production, they've really ramped this up and they are seeing the gains. We know that President Trump has withdrawn military donations, as it were. The EU, they're still giving a lot to Ukraine. There's this 90 billion euro loan which is coming Kyiv's way. So that's militarily. In terms of what's going on diplomatically, President Trump is key to this. After the G7, he seems to be aligned with the other EU leaders, saying that, yes, he'll ramp up sanctions on Russia, but will he actually continue down this path? Will he continue to have interest in this conflict, or will he try and push Ukraine once more into a very, very bad deal? We shall see.
Nick, thank you. Nick Beake in Kiev. And that's a summary of what you need to know on the war in Ukraine.